You're tuning into the deep dive, and today we're getting into something that's, well, pretty much everywhere, the global ink market.
It really is.
And you're here because you want the quick, solid insights on this industry size, growth, where it's headed, without wading through dense reports.
Exactly. So we've got this recent, pretty comprehensive market analysis focusing on 2025 as a key point.
Right.
And we've boiled it down. It's full of projections, market value, growth rates, different segments, how things look region by region.
Okay, great. So our mission here is to slice through that data, pull out the really important bits. What's the big picture? What's the headline for the global ink market right now, and where's it going?
The main story is growth. Simple
Yeah.
as that. The report is projecting the global ink market will hit USD XX million in 2025.
Okay, USD XX million. That's a pretty solid number to start with, but it's not static, right? What happens after 2025?
No, definitely not static. We're looking at some serious expansion. By 2033, the forecast suggests it could reach USD XX million.
Wow, okay. USD XX million to XX million. That's quite a jump. What's driving that kind of increase? Is there a specific rate?
Yeah, the analysis points to a compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of about 7.4% for that period, 2025 to 2033.
7.4% CAGR. So that's the average annual growth, assuming reinvestment.
That's right. And a lot of that fuel comes from, well, increasing demand for packaging and labeling. It's just huge across so many industries.
Packaging. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Everything comes wrapped or boxed. And this report, it has a time frame for these calculations, doesn't it? A base year.
It does. They're using 2024 as the base year, and it also includes historical data from 2021 to 2024, so we get some context,
Ah, okay. So we see the recent past too.
and then projects forward all the way to 2033.
Got it. So not just where we're going, but where we've just been. Okay, let's slice this global pie up. How does it look regionally?
Well, right now, North America has the biggest slice, over 40% of the total market, actually.
Over 40%. Okay.
Their market size in 2025 is estimated at USD XX million, and they're looking at a CAGR of 6.2% through to 2033.
Okay, North America leading the charge. What's pushing the growth there specifically?
It's a mix of things, really. Consistent demand for packaging, like we said. Also, digital printing is really taking hold more and more,
Right.
and there's that definite trend towards eco-friendly inks. People are asking for it.
Makes sense. And within North America.
The U.S. is the giant, obviously. USD XX million in 2025 with a 6.0% CAGR projected. Canada's next, USD XX million, but a slightly higher TGR at 7.0%.
Interesting.
And Mexico's significant too, USD XX million with a 6.7% CAGR.
So solid, steady growth pretty much across North America. What about Europe? How do they stack up?
Europe's holding a big piece too, over 30% of the global market. That translates to about USD XX million in 2025.
And their growth rate.
Projected CAGR is a solid 6.5%. Pretty healthy.
And the drivers there, similar themes.
Yeah, quite similar, actually. Sustainability is huge in Europe, maybe even more pronounced sometimes. So big push for greener inks.
Okay.
Plus, the packaging industry keeps growing and e-commerce is still expanding rapidly. That all feeds into ink demand.
Right. Any standouts within Europe?
There are some interesting variations. The UK, for instance, is looking at a pretty strong CAGR, 7.3%. Germany's up there too at 6.7%. Then you've got Sweden at 6.6%. Switzerland and Luxembourg both around 6.8%. Denmark 6.3%.
So quite a bit of variation.
Yeah, and then France, Italy, Russia, Spain are a bit more moderate, like 5.5% to 5.9%. The rest of Europe combined is around 5.2%.
Fascinating how those regional economies and preferences shape the numbers. Okay, let's shift over to Asia Pacific. APAC, what's happening there?
APAC.
Yeah.
That's where things get really dynamic. They hold about 23% of the market share,
Okay, about 23%.
which is around USD XX million for 2025. But the really big headline for APAC is the growth rate.
Yeah.
The projected CAGR is a whopping 10.0%. It's the fastest growing region by a decent margin.
Wow, 10%. That's
Yeah.
really moving. What's behind that kind of acceleration?
Well, it's several things hitting at once. You've got booming industries like packaging, publishing, textiles, all big ink users.
Right.
Then there's rapid urbanization, rising consumer spending that comes with it, and of course the absolute explosion of e-commerce across the region. Think of all the packages.
Yeah, absolutely. Any specific countries driving that 10%?
South Korea really jumps out with an 11.8% CAGR forecast. Southeast Asia as a whole is also very high, 11.0%. Then you have Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, all clustered around 9.7%.
And China, India.
China, it being a massive market, is projected at 9.5%. India is strong too at 9.1%. Japan's a bit lower, but still solid at 8.5%. The rest of APAC collectively is around 9.8%.
That really paints a picture of incredible momentum in Asia Pacific. Okay, let's head to South America. What's their slice?
South America holds a smaller piece, just over 5% globally. Market size estimated at USD XX million in 2025.
Then their growth.
Projected CAGR 7.4%. So growing slightly faster than the global average, actually.
Okay, and the drivers in South America, similar story again.
Yeah, pretty similar themes. Packaging, publishing, textiles are important sectors. E-commerce adoption is climbing. Digital printing is making inroads.
And the eco-friendly angle?
Yes, that's starting to gain traction there too, seeing rising interest in sustainable options.
Any country highlights in South America?
Brazil's the largest market, looking at an 8.0% CAGR. Argentina is actually projected slightly higher at 8.3%. Colombia, Peru, Chile are all showing good growth, kind of in the 7% range. The rest of South America together is about 6.5%.
Okay, got it. Moving on to the Middle East, what's the picture there?
Middle East is around 2% of the global share. Market size estimated at USD XX million in 2025.
And their growth projection?
Projected CAGR is 7.7%, so again, slightly above the global average rate.
What's pushing growth in the Middle East?
Key drivers are the expansion of, you guessed it, packaging, but also publishing and commercial printing.
Okay.
Plus the familiar factors, rise of e-commerce, increasing use of digital printing technologies.
Any specific countries to watch?
Turkey looks particularly strong, projected CAGR of 8.7%. Qatar is also high at 8.5%, Saudi Arabia at 8.0%. UAE and Egypt are growing too, and the rest of the Middle East is forecast around 6.7%.
Okay, and finally, Africa. What's the market share and growth look like there?
Africa currently holds the smallest share, about 1%. That's estimated at USD XX million for 2025.
And the CAGR?
Their CAGR is projected at 7.7%, same as the Middle East.
Interesting. And the factors influencing the African market?
It's growth in those key industries again.
Yeah.
Packaging, printing, publishing. This is tied to rising consumer goods consumption and e-commerce expansion.
Right.
Digital printing adoption is also increasing, and there's definitely growing awareness around sustainable ink choices.
And the key markets within Africa?
Nigeria and South Africa are the big ones,
Yeah.
both projected around the 8.0 to 8.5% CAGR mark. The rest of Africa collectively is actually projected a bit higher at 8.7%.
So really a diverse global picture, but APAC clearly stands out for speed. Now, this report breaks things down beyond geography, right? Like types of ink.
Exactly. It looks at market segments by ink type, formulating technology, and application. So if we look at ink type first,
Okay.
printing ink is the dominant segment right now, which, makes sense. Packaging, commercial print, labels, it's everywhere.
Right, the traditional stuff. Is that expected to stay dominant?
Well, it'll likely stay the biggest in terms of sheer volume,
Huh.
but the report actually points to non-printing ink as the fastest growing category.
Non-printing, what does that cover?
Think inks used for things beyond just color on paper or plastic,
Mhm.
like functional coatings for electronics, special finishes for cars that add durability, protective films, that kind of thing.
Ah, okay. Ink doing more than just looking pretty or conveying info. Interesting. What about the technologies used to make these inks?
Right, the formulating technology.
Yeah.
Currently, water-based inks have the largest market share.
And that's the eco-friendly angle again?
Pretty much. They use water as the solvent, release fewer VOCs, those volatile organic compounds, so they align really well with the sustainability push we keep seeing.
Makes total sense. Are there other important technologies?
Oh yeah, UV-cured inks are growing really rapidly.
UV cured, how do they work?
They harden or cure almost instantly when you expose them to ultraviolet light. This means faster production,
Ah, speed.
energy savings, and they create a really durable finish. So they're very popular for things like packaging and digital printing.
Efficiency and durability. Got it. Any others mentioned?
Yeah, the report also mentions oil-based and solvent-based inks. They still have their applications, but they're facing more pressure from environmental regulations.
Okay. So water-based leading for now due to being greener, but UV cured is coming up fast because it's efficient. Now, where does all this ink actually go? The applications.
Right, applications. The absolute giant here is the packaging sector, by a long shot.
No surprise there, I guess.
Yeah. Not really. Think about product labels, cardboard boxes, flexible pouches, shrink wrap. It all needs ink for branding, info, appeal. Demand for packaging, both consumer and industrial, is just relentless. And there's that extra layer now of wanting packaging to be sustainable and look good.
True. Are any other application areas growing particularly fast?
Yes, the tags and labels category is specifically highlighted as growing strongly.
Why labels specifically?
Well, think about the need for product ID, tracking in basically every industry, food, pharma, retail, plus e-commerce. Again,
Right, shipping labels, product labels.
exactly. It all adds up. The report also lists other important areas, of course. Commercial printing, like brochures and magazines, security printing, like banknotes, inks for ceramic tiles, textiles, and other consumer goods.
So packaging and labels are really the big volume and big growth areas.
Okay,
Zooming out a bit. Beyond the segments, what are the big forces really shaping this whole market, the dynamics?
the report identifies a few key dynamics. On the driver side, a big one is the wider adoption of digital printing.
How does that drive the ink market?
Digital requires specialized inks, and it allows for things like customized printing, shorter runs, print on demand, which opens up new needs.
Okay, what else?
That environmental awareness we've touched on, huge driver, pushing demand for eco-friendly, sustainable inks. And, even with digital media, traditional advertising and publishing still consume a lot of ink for commercial print.
Makes sense. But it can't all be smooth sailing. What are the challenges or restraints?
Definitely challenges. A big one is the volatility of raw material prices. Ink ingredients can fluctuate, and that impacts cost. Supply chain disruptions, too. We've all seen that recently.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Those are major restraints. And then there are the environmental regulations getting stricter in many places, which limits the use of some older traditional ink types.
So cost pressures and the green imperative are the big hurdles. What about overarching trends? Where's the momentum?
Two major trends really stand out. First, that unmistakable accelerating shift towards sustainable and eco-friendly inks. It's driven by consumers and regulations.
Okay, sustainability number one.
And second, the ongoing technological advances, particularly in digital and inkjet printing. They're improving quality, efficiency, and demanding new, more advanced inks to keep up.
So innovation in green inks and better digital printing tech. Those seem like the key themes. Now, who are the companies fighting it out in this space? What's the competitive landscape like?
The report calls it highly competitive, which isn't surprising.
Right.
The major players are really focused on R&D, product innovation, especially, again, in sustainable inks.
That seems critical.
Absolutely. And staying ahead on the technology curve for digital and UV inks is also crucial for them to keep their market share.
Any examples of what companies are doing strategically?
Yeah, a couple were mentioned. For instance, Quad Industries and Henkel expanded a partnership specifically around printed electronics.
Printed electronics using ink.
Exactly. Shows how ink is moving beyond just graphics. Also, PV Nanocell announced a new carbon-based ink specifically for printed electronics. It highlights that material science innovation that's happening.
Fascinating. Ink becoming part of the tech itself? Does the report name the big players?
It does list several key competitors, the big familiar names: Flint Group, DIC Corporation, Siegwerk, Cicada Inks, T&K, Toko,
Okay.
Dedukisa Color and Chemicals, Deers Ico, Eppel Druckfarben, Toyo Inc., Huber Group, Tokyo Printing Inc. It notes, though, that some competitor data is probably kept confidential.
Right, standard practice. So a mix of large global companies competing hard on innovation and maybe partnerships. Okay, well, we have covered a ton of ground here in this deep dive on the global ink market. Let's try and summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest point is just the significant growth expected over the next decade or so. Big potential there.
Right, that's 7.4% CAGR globally.
Exactly. And we saw how that varies by region, with Asia-Pacific really being the growth engine to watch.
That 10% CAGR is hard to ignore.
For sure. Then clearly, sustainability isn't just a buzzword, it's fundamental. It's driving innovation towards greener inks.
Yeah, water-based, UV-cured.
Right. And finally, technology, especially digital printing tech, is constantly evolving and reshaping what's possible and what's demanded from inks.
It definitely feels like a market in motion, doesn't it? Pulled by consumer demands, pushed by regulations, and enabled by new tech in printing and packaging.
Absolutely. It's not a static industry at all. Lots of powerful forces at play.
So thinking about all that, the focus on sustainable packaging, the speed of digital printing, it makes you wonder what kind of really innovative ink technologies might dominate in the next 10 years? And maybe how could that impact things beyond just printing like those printed electronics or even smart materials you mentioned?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, something to think about the future uses for something we often take for granted, like ink. We hope this gives you, our listener, some food for thought on how these trends might connect to your own world. Thanks for diving deep with us today.